Picture this. It's 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in February. I'm standing outside my own apartment building in nothing but jeans and a thin hoodie, watching my breath form clouds in the freezing air. My keys are in my hand, but they're completely useless. Because my roommate Jake had changed the locks. I can hear him inside, laughing with his buddies. Actually laughing. The sound cuts through the door like a knife, and I absolutely know, that they're laughing at me. Jake! I pound on the door until my knuckles go numb. This isn't funny anymore, man. Open the door. More laughter. Then I hear his voice, muffled but clear enough. Relax, dude. It's just a prank. You'll figure it out. A prank. He called locking me out of my own home at midnight in 20-degree weather a prank. I tried calling him, straight to voicemail. I tried texting, read but not answered. I even threw pebbles at our second-floor window like some lovesick teenager, but the blinds stayed closed. That's when it hit me. I had nowhere else to go. My parents lived 3 states away. My ex had made sure I lost touch with most of our mutual friends after the breakup, my coworkers. We weren't exactly crash-on-your-couch close. I had exactly $43 in my checking account until payday on Friday. So I did the only thing I could do. I walked to my car in the apartment complex parking lot, cranked up the heat, and tried to convince myself this would all be over by morning. The car seats weren't made for sleeping. Every position hurt something. My neck, my back, my legs. The windows kept fogging up, and every time a car drove by, their headlights would sweep across my makeshift bedroom, reminding me how pathetic this all was. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off to sleep, curled up like a pretzel in the driver's seat. I woke up to Jake's girlfriend Sarah parking next to me at 7 a.m. heading to work. She saw me in the car and did a double take, but kept walking, didn't even wave. That should have been my first clue that this wasn't just a prank gone too far. But I still believed, stupidly, desperately believed, that Jake would come to his senses, apologize, and let me back into the home I'd been paying half the rent for. I had no idea that sleeping in my car that first night was just the beginning of the worst week of my adult life. 6 months earlier, I thought I'd won the roommate lottery. I was scrolling through Roomster at 2 a.m., desperate and running out of options. My relationship with Emma had just imploded in spectacular fashion, the kind of breakup where you realize you've been living a lie for 2 years. She kept the apartment we'd shared, and I kept the debt from the vacation we'd taken to fix things. That's when Jake's profile popped up. Clean apartment photos, good credit score, stable job at a tech startup. His bio read, easygoing guy looking for a chill roommate. I keep common areas clean, pay bills on time, and mind my own business. Let's make this simple and drama-free. Drama-free. Those 2 words were exactly what I needed to hear. We met at a coffee shop near the apartment he'd found. Jake showed up exactly on time, wearing a pressed button-down and designer jeans. He had this confident smile and firm handshake that screamed, responsible adult. So, you work in marketing? He asked, stirring his latte. Digital marketing for a mid-size firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. I didn't mention that I'd just taken a pay cut after the company's restructuring. That's cool, man. I respect people who work hard. He pulled out his phone and showed me photos of the apartment. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, in-unit laundry. Split everything 50-50 down the middle. Sound fair? It sounded perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But I was in survival mode. The apartment was everything he'd promised. Spacious, clean, in a decent neighborhood. The rent was steep, but split between 2 people. It was manageable. Barely manageable for me, but manageable. I can get us moved in by next weekend, Jake said, already pulling out the lease paperwork. The landlord likes me, so as long as your credit check clears, we're golden. That's when he suggested putting his name first on the lease. Just for convenience, he said with that same confident smile. Makes it easier for the landlord to have one primary contact. But don't worry, we're both equally responsible for everything. I should have questioned that. I should have insisted on being listed as the primary tenant, or at least pushed for both our names to have equal weight. But Emma had always handled the adult stuff in our relationship, and I was so grateful to have found a solution to my housing crisis that I just nodded and signed where Jake pointed. Jake was the perfect roommate for exactly 3 weeks. He kept his word about cleanliness. He paid his half of utilities without being asked. He was quiet and respectful. We'd grab beers together sometimes, watch games on the weekend. I actually started thinking we might become real friends. I should have known it was too good to last. The first crack in the facade was so small I almost missed it. Jake started bringing people over more often, friends who looked like they hadn't showered in days and talked too loud about things that made me uncomfortable. When I mentioned it casually, Jake just shrugged. "They're harmless, dude. Don't be so uptight." But I wasn't being uptight. I was being practical, and something in his tone had shifted. Looking back, I can see the exact moment Jake stopped pretending to be my friend and started treating me like an inconvenience in his space. It started with little things, comments that were supposed to be jokes but felt like tiny cuts. "You sure eat a lot of cereal for a grown man," he'd say when I was making breakfast. Maybe try doing dishes before the smell reaches my room, when I'd left one bowl in the sink overnight. "You know, most people your age have their life more figured out by now." Each comment came with that same charming smile, so I convinced myself he was just being friendly, giving me a hard time the way guys do. But there was something sharp underneath it all, something that made my stomach clench every time. Then money started disappearing. Small amounts at first. $20 I'd left on the kitchen counter. Some quarters from my laundry jar. I started keeping better track, and the pattern became clear. Jake was taking my money. When I finally worked up the courage to confront him, he acted genuinely shocked. "Dude, I would never steal from you. Maybe you miscounted? You've been pretty stressed lately." He put his hand on my shoulder like a concerned friend. "Are you sure you're remembering things right?" I wasn't imagining it, but Jake was so convincing, so earnest in his denial that I started doubting myself. Maybe I had miscounted. Maybe the stress of my new job and the breakup was messing with my head. The new job. That was another blow I hadn't seen coming. 3 months after moving in, my company decided to restructure again. They kept me on, but cut my salary by 30%. Suddenly, my half of the rent was eating up almost my entire paycheck. I picked up a weekend job at a retail store just to make ends meet. 12-hour days became my normal. I'd get home exhausted, grab whatever leftovers were in the fridge, and collapse into bed. "You look like hell," Jake would say, not moving from his spot on our couch. "Maybe try getting your life together?" His friends got sketchier. They'd show up at all hours, stay until L3 a.m., leave empty beer bottles and suspicious smells throughout the apartment. When I asked Jake to keep it down on weeknights, he laughed. "It's my apartment too, man. Don't be such a buzzkill." His apartment too. That phrase started coming up more and more. "Don't leave your stuff in my living room. Keep your groceries on your side of the fridge. Maybe find somewhere else to hang out tonight. I've got people coming over." I should have realized what was happening. Jake wasn't just being a bad roommate. He was slowly, systematically making me feel like I didn't belong there, like I was a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. But I was working 16-hour days just to afford my portion of the rent. I was exhausted, isolated, and honestly, I was scared. Finding a new place would mean coming up with first and last month's rent, security deposits, moving costs, money I didn't have. So I stayed. I convinced myself that Jake was just going through a rough patch, that things would get better once I got my finances sorted out. The night before he locked me out, Jake's behavior reached a new low. I came home from my retail shift at 11 p.m. to find him and 4 of his friends doing lines of something white off our coffee table. "Oh, hey, roomie," Jake called out, not even trying to hide what they were doing. "Don't mind us, we're just living our best life." His friends laughed. One of them, a guy with neck tattoos and dead eyes, looked me up and down like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. I went straight to my room and locked the door. Stayed awake most of the night listening to them trash our apartment. I should have called the police. I should have documented everything. I should have started looking for a new place that very night. Instead, I went to work the next morning, exhausted and defeated, thinking the worst thing Jake could do was embarrass me in front of his druggy friends. I had no idea he was about to make me homeless. By the second night in my car, I'd learned things about myself I never had to know. Like how long you can hold your bladder when the nearest public restroom is a 10-minute walk away and you're terrified someone will tow your car if you leave the parking lot. Like how creative you can get with a gym membership when it's your only access to hot water and basic hygiene. Like how humiliating it is to lie to your coworkers when they ask why you look like you haven't slept in days. Just been burning the candle at both ends, I'd say, forcing a smile while my back screamed from another night contorted in the driver's seat. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort, though that was pretty awful. It was the complete radio silence from Jake. I'd sent him 17 text messages over 3 days, called him 23 times. Each message got more desperate, more pleading. Jake, this has gone too far. Just let me in so we can talk. I get it. You're mad about something. Let's work it out like adults. Dude, I'm literally sleeping in my car. Please. Every single message showed as read. He was seeing them. He just didn't care. On the third day, I made a mistake that almost broke me completely. I was killing time at the McDonald's down the street, nursing a $1 coffee and trying to charge my dying phone when I decided to check Instagram. Just scrolling mindlessly, trying to pretend my life wasn't falling apart. That's when I saw Jake's story. The first slide was a photo of our living room with the caption, "When your roommate disappears and you finally get some peace and quiet." The second slide was a video of him lounging on our couch, beer in hand, talking directly to the camera. Pro tip: sometimes the best roommate is no roommate. Don't know where my boy went, but I'm not complaining. He was laughing, actually laughing while I was homeless, eating gas station hot dogs and sleeping in a car that smelled like desperation, and broken dreams. But it was the third slide that made me physically sick. A screenshot of my desperate text messages with his commentary, "When pranks go too far and your roommate has a complete meltdown." He'd posted my private messages, my pleading, vulnerable, desperate messages, for all his followers to see, and they were eating it up. 37 likes in 2 hours, comments like "savage" and "your roommate needs to chill," and "plot twist, he's been living in his car the whole time." I ran to the bathroom and threw up the single hash brown I'd managed to eat that morning. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This wasn't some misunderstanding between roommates. Jake was deliberately, systematically humiliating me for his own entertainment. And the worst part? I still didn't understand why. That night, my third night in the car, I got my answer. I was trying to find a comfortable position. Spoiler alert, there wasn't one. When I saw Sarah's car pull into the parking lot. Jake's girlfriend, the one who'd seen me in the car that first morning and acted like I was invisible. She didn't go to the front entrance like usual. Instead, she walked around to the back of the building where the fire escape led directly to our second-floor apartment. Jake met her at the window. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told the whole story. This wasn't a casual visit. They were planning something. Sarah handed Jake a box. Small, like the kind jewelry comes in. He opened it, showed her whatever was inside, and they both started laughing. Then Jake pulled out his phone, took a selfie of them together, and immediately started typing. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Jake had posted another Instagram story. This one was a photo of him and Sarah with the caption, "Some big changes coming soon. Can't wait to start this new chapter with my queen. That's well." And I finally understood. This wasn't about money or personality conflicts or me being a bad roommate. Jake wanted Sarah to move in, and he needed me gone to make that happen. The prank wasn't designed to be temporary. It was designed to break me down, force me to give up, and abandon the lease so he could have our apartment all to himself. I sat in that freezing car, staring at that post, and felt something inside me snap. Not break. Snap. Like a rubber band that had been stretched too far and finally found its original shape. Jake thought he was dealing with some pushover who'd just disappear quietly. He thought he could humiliate me, steal my home, and face zero consequences. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The confirmation came from Marcus, a mutual friend who worked at the same coffee shop where Jake and I had first met. I'd been avoiding everyone I knew, too embarrassed to explain why I looked like I'd been living rough. But Marcus cornered me at the gym on day 4, the only place I could shower and pretend to be a functional human being. "Dude, what happened to you?" Marcus asked, genuine concern in his voice. You look like you haven't slept in a week." I tried to brush it off, but Marcus wasn't buying it. After 15 minutes of gentle probing, the whole story came pouring out of me. The lockout, the car, Jake's social media posts, everything. Marcus's expression shifted from concern to anger to something that looked almost like guilt. "Oh man," he said, running his hands through his hair. "Oh man, you don't know." "Don't know what?" Marcus glanced around the empty locker room, then pulled out his phone. "Jake's been talking about this for weeks. I thought he was just blowing off steam, but..." He showed me a group chat from 3 weeks ago. Jake was in it, along with Marcus and a few other guys from their college days. The messages made my blood run cold. Jake: "Need advice, guys. Roommate situation is getting old." Marcus: "Bad roommate?" Jake: "Nah, he's fine. But Sarah wants to move in and I need him gone." Someone else: "Just talk to him?" Jake: "Tried hints, dude's dense. Might need to get creative." Marcus: "Don't do anything stupid, man." Jake: "Define stupid." I scrolled down. The messages got worse. Jake: "Operation Get Rid of Dead Weight is in motion." Jake: "Step 1. Make home uncomfortable." Check. Jake: "Step 2. Financial pressure." Check. Jake: "Step 3. Well, let's just say some people need bigger hints." The final message was time-stamped 2 days before the lockout. Jake: "Sometimes you gotta force people to see the writing on the wall. Don't worry, it'll just be temporary. Once he breaks the lease, problem solved." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. He planned this. All of it. Marcus nodded, looking miserable. I should have said something. I thought he was just venting, not actually. Jesus, I'm sorry. How long? My voice came out as a whisper. How long has he been planning to get rid of me? Marcus scrolled up further in the chat. The messages went back 2 months. 2 months. Jake had been systematically planning my removal from the apartment for 2 months. The weird comments, the money disappearing, his sketchy friends taking over our space. It wasn't random bad roommate behavior. It was psychological warfare. There's more, Marcus said reluctantly. He switched to Instagram and showed me Jake's close friend's story, the one only his inner circle could see. It was a video from that first night, filmed from inside our apartment. Jake was at the window, pointing down at my car in the parking lot. Operation Homeless Roommate is a success, he whispered to the camera, trying not to laugh too loud. Dude's been out there for 6 hours. I give him 2 days before he cracks and break. It's the lease. The camera panned to show Sarah in the background, unpacking boxes in what used to be my living room. She'd already moved in. While I was sleeping in my car, eating vending machine dinners and wondering what I'd done wrong, Sarah was hanging her pictures on our walls and rearranging our furniture. They'd played me perfectly, made me think I was losing my mind, that maybe I really was a bad roommate who deserved to be pushed out. They'd isolated me, exhausted me, and then delivered the final blow designed to make me disappear quietly. I have to show you something else, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. He pulled up Jake's Venmo. 3 days ago, the day after the lockout, Jake had received a payment from Sarah for $200. The memo read, "First month's rent for my new place." My half of the rent. Sarah had paid Jake my portion of the rent, officially replacing me as his roommate while I was still legally responsible for the lease. I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The desperation and self-doubt that had been eating me alive for 4 days crystallized into pure, focused rage. Jake thought he was clever. He thought he'd found the perfect way to steal my home, humiliate me publicly, and face 0 consequences. He thought I was just some broken, friendless loser who'd disappear without a fight. But here's what Jake didn't know about me. I'd spent 2 years watching my ex-girlfriend manipulate every situation to her advantage. I'd learned to recognize gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and calculated cruelty, and I'd sworn to myself that I'd never let anyone make me feel powerless again. Jake had just made the biggest mistake of his life, because I wasn't going anywhere, and I was done playing defense. I walked into the Legal Aid Society office at 8 a.m. sharp on Monday morning, armed with a folder thick enough to choke a horse, screenshots of Jake's social media posts, photos of my car in the parking lot time-stamped with my phone's GPS data, the group chat messages Marcus had forwarded me, pictures of the changed locks, copies of my lease agreement, bank statements showing rent payments, and a detailed timeline of everything that had happened. The receptionist took one look at me, still wearing the same clothes I'd been sleeping in, probably smelling like desperation and car upholstery, and directed me to a waiting area with the kind of gentle efficiency reserved for people whose lives had obviously fallen apart. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Maria Santos, a legal aid attorney who looked like she'd seen every kind of housing horror story imaginable. "Tell me what happened," she said, opening a legal pad. I started with the lockout and worked backwards. Maria took notes, occasionally asking for clarification or requesting specific documents from my folder. When I showed her Jake's Instagram posts, she actually winced. "This is bad," she said, scrolling through the screenshots. "Really bad. But bad for him, not you." "What do you mean?" Maria leaned back in her chair. "Your roommate has committed several violations of tenant law: illegal lockout, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and possibly fraud if he's been accepting rent payments from his girlfriend while you're still on the lease." She pulled out a thick binder and started flipping through pages. "In this state, tenants have the right to quiet enjoyment of their rental property. When a landlord, or in this case a co-tenant who's acting as your landlord, illegally locks you out, they're liable for damages, attorney fees, and potentially punitive damages. But Jake's not my landlord. We're both on the lease. Doesn't matter. The moment he changed those locks and refused you entry, he assumed the role of landlord and became subject to landlord-tenant law. And let me tell you, landlord-tenant law does not mess around with illegal lockouts." Maria started making a list on her legal pad. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we document everything you've shown me in an official complaint. Second, we demand immediate access to your legal residence. Third, we file for damages, lost wages, the cost of sleeping in hotels, emotional distress, attorney fees." "I didn't sleep in hotels. I slept in my car." "Even better. That makes the case stronger." She looked up from her notes. "How do you feel about making Jake face some real consequences for this?" For the first time in 5 days, I smiled. I'd feel pretty good about that. The first call Maria made was to Jake's phone. I sat in her office, listening to her professional, ice-cold voice deliver an ultimatum that made my heart race. "Mr. Torres, this is Maria Santos from Legal Aid representing your roommate. You have illegally locked my client out of his legal residence, which constitutes a violation of state tenant law. You have until 5 p.m. today to restore his access, or we'll be filing an emergency court order and seeking maximum damages." I couldn't hear Jake's response, but Maria's expression told me everything I needed to know. "Mr. Torres, I strongly advise you to speak with an attorney before responding. My client has documented evidence of your harassment, including your social media posts bragging about the illegal lockout. This case is very straightforward, and the penalties for illegal lockout can be severe." She hung up and turned to me. "He's going to call back within an hour, guaranteed. Guys like this always do. They start confident and then realize they're in real trouble." Maria was right. Jake called back in 47 minutes. This time Maria put the call on speaker so I could hear both sides. "Look, this is all a big misunderstanding," Jake said, his voice noticeably less cocky than usual. "It was just a prank that got out of hand. I was always going to let him back in." "Mr. Torres, you posted on social media that you hoped your roommate would break the lease. You accepted rent money from another person to replace him. This wasn't a prank. It was a calculated scheme to force my client out of his legal residence." Silence on the other end. "Here's what's going to happen," Maria continued. "You're going to provide my client with new keys immediately. You're going to remove any unauthorized occupants from the apartment, and you're going to compensate him for the damages you've caused, or we'll let a judge decide what you owe." "This is crazy," Jake said, but his voice was shaking now. "He can't just... I have rights too." "You had rights. You forfeited them when you illegally locked out a legal tenant. The question now is whether you want to resolve this professionally or let it play out in court where your social media posts will become public record." Another long silence. I need to think about this." "You have until tomorrow at 9 a.m. to provide new keys and remove unauthorized occupants. After that, we file the emergency court order. Your choice, Mr. Torres." Maria hung up and turned to me with a satisfied smile. He'll cave. They always do when they realize the internet evidence is permanent and the law is completely against them. What if he doesn't? Then we go to court, and Jake learns the hard way that actions have consequences. She started packing up her files. Either way, you're going home tomorrow, and Jake's going to pay for what he put you through. For the first time in almost a week, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope, and the sweet, intoxicating taste of justice about to be served. At 9:17 a.m. the next morning, I stood outside my apartment building with Maria, a police officer named Detective Rodriguez, and a locksmith named Eddie, who looked like he'd seen his share of domestic drama. Jake was 20 minutes late to his own surrender. Typical, Maria muttered, checking her watch. He's probably inside coaching his girlfriend on what to say. She was right. At 9:37 a.m., Jake finally opened the door, and Sarah was nowhere to be seen, but I could hear movement in the back bedroom, someone trying very hard to be quiet. Hey, Jake said to me, avoiding eye contact. Look, man, I'm sorry things got so out of hand. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward. Mr. Torres, we're here to restore legal access to the apartment for Mr. Davidson, who's listed as a tenant on the lease. Do you have the new keys? Jake's hand shook slightly as he handed over a set of keys. These should work. I changed them back to the original locks. The locksmith tested the keys and nodded to Maria. These are good? Excellent. Maria turned to Jake with the kind of smile sharks probably give before they attack. Now, about the unauthorized occupant. Our agreement was that you'd remove anyone who's not on the lease. Sarah's not living here, Jake said quickly. She was just visiting. For a few days, but she's gone now. As if on cue, a loud crash came from the back bedroom, followed by what sounded like someone trying to wrestle a suitcase through a window. Detective Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. That's a very active ghost you've got back there. Jake's face went red. Okay, look, she's leaving. She was already leaving. This whole thing was just a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding, Maria said, pulling out a thick folder, is documented in these social media posts where you bragged about illegally locking out your roommate. The misunderstanding is this Venmo payment where your girlfriend paid you rent money while Mr. Davidson was sleeping in his car. She spread the printed screenshots across our kitchen counter like she was dealing cards. Jake's face went from red to pale as he saw the evidence laid out in black and white. That was just... Jake stammered, looking desperately at Detective Rodriguez for some kind of backup. The detective was stone-faced. Mr. Torres, I'd strongly recommend you cooperate fully with Ms. Santos and her client. Illegal lockout is a serious offense, and interfering with someone's housing can escalate to criminal charges. That's when Sarah finally emerged from the bedroom, dragging a suitcase and looking like she'd been caught robbing a bank. She took one look at the police officer and Maria's folder of evidence and immediately threw Jake under the bus. I told him this was a stupid idea, she said, glaring at Jake. I told him you don't just kick people out because you want them gone, but he said it would be fine, that you'd just leave on your own. Jake's mouth fell open. Sarah, what am I doing? I'm being honest. Sarah turned to Maria. Look, I didn't know he was planning to lock him out. Jake told me his roommate was moving out voluntarily. When I found out what really happened, I told Jake he needed to fix it. I almost laughed. Almost. But watching Jake realize that his girlfriend was abandoning him the second things got legal was too satisfying to interrupt. Maria nodded professionally. Ms. Hernandez, do you have documentation of the rent payment you made to Mr. Torres? It's on Venmo, $1,200 for first month's rent. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Maria the transaction. But I was told the other roommate had already moved out. And when did you discover that wasn't true? Sarah glanced at Jake, who was staring at the floor like he wanted it to swallow him whole. 3 days ago, when I saw him sleeping in his car in the parking lot. And you didn't think to mention this to Mr. Torres? I did mention it. I told Jake he needed to let him back in immediately. But Jake said it was complicated, that they had some kind of agreement. Detective Rodriguez stepped in. Mr. Torres, is it true that you knew your roommate was sleeping in his car and chose to continue the lockout anyway? Jake looked up, and for the first time since I'd known him, his confident facade was completely gone. He looked exactly like what he was, a small, cruel person who'd gotten caught doing something indefensible. It wasn't supposed to go that far. I thought he'd just find somewhere else to stay for a few days. For someone who thought it wouldn't go that far, Maria said. You certainly posted a lot of social media content celebrating your roommate's homelessness. She pulled out another screenshot, one I hadn't seen before. It was from Jake's close friend's story, posted on day 3 of my car camping adventure. The image was a photo of our living room with Sarah's stuff scattered around. The caption read, "Mission accomplished. Sometimes you gotta play hardball to get what you want. New roommate is way better than the old one." Sarah saw the screenshot and went nuclear. "Are you kidding me?" she screamed at Jake. "You posted about me like I'm some kind of prize you won by making someone homeless?" "Baby, that's not... Don't baby me. You lied to me about everything." Sarah turned to Maria and Detective Rodriguez. "I wanted on record that I had no idea this was planned. I thought his roommate moved out voluntarily." Jake tried to salvage the situation. "Sarah, come on, I knew nothing." Sarah grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door. "And now I know exactly what kind of person you are." She paused at the door and looked back at me. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. If I'd known what he was doing, I would have called the police myself." Then she was gone, leaving Jake standing in our apartment, surrounded by evidence of his own cruelty and facing the legal consequences he'd never seen coming. The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, Detective Rodriguez spoke. "Mr. Torres, you need to understand how serious this situation is. Illegal lockout, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. These aren't pranks. These are crimes." Jake nodded numbly. Maria opened her briefcase and pulled out a legal document. "Mr. Torres, this is a settlement agreement. You can sign it now and resolve this matter, or we can proceed to court and let a judge decide your penalties." "What does it say?" Maria's smile was absolutely predatory. "It says you're about to learn that actions have consequences." The settlement agreement Maria had prepared was a thing of beauty. Jake had to pay me $4,200 in damages, covering the gym membership I'd used for showers, the food I'd bought from gas stations, the lost wages from missing work due to exhaustion and emotional distress, plus my attorney fees. He had to provide written acknowledgement that he'd illegally locked me out and harassed me. He had to remove all social media posts related to the incident and issue a public apology. And here's the best part. He had 30 days to find alternative housing. The lease was in both our names, but Jake's illegal lockout had violated the terms of our rental agreement. I could stay. He had to go. "This is insane," Jake said, staring at the settlement papers. "I can't afford to move out and pay all these damages." "You should have thought about that before you made your roommate homeless," Maria replied without an ounce of sympathy. "Sign the agreement, or we go to court where the damages could be much higher." Jake signed. Within 24 hours, his Instagram posts about my prank meltdown were gone, replaced by a story that must have killed him to write. "I need to publicly apologize to my former roommate. What I called a prank was actually illegal harassment that left him homeless for several days. I was wrong. It wasn't funny, and I take full responsibility for my actions. I'm sorry." The responses were brutal. People who'd been laughing at his original posts were now calling him out for being a sociopath. Several mutual friends unfollowed him immediately. His reputation, which he'd worked so hard to cultivate, was destroyed overnight. But the real karma came 2 weeks later. I was settling into life with my new roommate, a graduate student named Alex who actually was drama-free, when Marcus texted me with an update. Jake's job had found out about the incident. Apparently, someone had forwarded them his social media posts and the public apology. Tech companies don't love employees who make people homeless for entertainment, and Jake was quietly restructured out of his position. Sarah had started dating someone new, a guy who posted pictures of them together with captions about finally finding someone who treats people with respect. And Jake? Jake had moved back in with his parents in their suburban hometown, posting increasingly desperate LinkedIn updates about exploring new opportunities and taking time to reassess my goals. The $4,200 settlement cleaned out his savings account. The cost of breaking his new lease, because he couldn't afford the rent without a roommate or a job, finished off his credit score. But the detail that satisfied me most came from Alex, who'd heard through the roommate app network that Jake was now posting on housing forums, desperately looking for someone to split rent with. No one wanted to live with him. His reputation in our city's young professional community was radioactive. Everyone knew about the guy who'd made his roommate home, less as a prank. Meanwhile, my life was better than it had been in years. The settlement money helped me build up an emergency fund. The experience had taught me to recognize manipulation and stand up for myself. Alex was not only a great roommate, but had become a genuine friend. I'd also discovered something about myself. I was stronger than I'd thought. When someone had tried to break me down systematically, I'd fought back and won. 6 months after the lockout, I ran into Jake at the grocery store. He was with his mom, looking thin and tired, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt instead of his usual designer clothes. He saw me first and immediately tried to duck down another aisle. "Jake," I called out. He stopped, shoulders tense, probably expecting me to humiliate him in public. Instead, I walked over and extended my hand. "How are you doing?" I asked. Jake looked confused, like this was some kind of trap. I'm okay. Things have been tough, but I'm okay." "Good. I'm glad you're okay." And I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore. The justice system had worked. Jake had faced consequences for his actions. He'd lost his job, his girlfriend, his apartment, and his reputation, all direct results of his own choices. That was enough. "I hope things get better for you," I said, and walked away. Because that's what victory looks like. Not revenge, not cruelty, not making someone suffer endlessly. Victory is getting your power back, protecting yourself from future harm, and being able to walk away knowing that people who hurt others eventually face the consequences of their actions. Jake had taught me that I was stronger than I knew, and I'd taught him that actions have consequences. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you're dealing with a housing situation that's making you miserable. Maybe you have a roommate who's pushing boundaries, a landlord who's ignoring your rights, or someone who's making you feel like you don't deserve sick respect in your own home. I want you to know something. You have more power than you think. Before Jake locked me out, I thought my only options were to put up with bad treatment or move out and start over. I didn't know about tenant rights, illegal lockout laws, or the fact that there are lawyers who specialize in helping people like us fight back against housing abuse. Here's what I wish I'd known 6 months earlier. First, document everything. Screenshots, photos, text messages, witnesses. Collect evidence like your housing depends on it, because it might. That folder of evidence I brought to legal aid was the difference between having a case and just having a complaint. Second, know your rights. In most states, tenants have the right to quiet enjoyment of their rental property. If someone is harassing you, locking you out, or making your home unlivable, that's not just bad roommate behavior. It might be illegal. Third, don't suffer in silence. I was so embarrassed about my situation that I isolated myself from everyone who might have helped me. Marcus had seen Jake's plan weeks before it happened, but I was too proud to maintain those friendships. If I'd stayed connected, I might have learned about Jake's scheme before I ended up homeless. Fourth, there are resources available. Legal aid societies, tenant rights organizations, housing advocates. These people exist specifically to help when you're in situations like mine. Many of them work for free or sliding scale fees because they understand that housing abuse often targets people who can't afford expensive lawyers. But here's the most important thing I learned. You don't have to accept abuse just because you're in a vulnerable position. I stayed in that toxic living situation for months because I thought I didn't have other options. I accepted Jake's increasingly cruel behavior because I was scared of being homeless. The irony is that by trying so hard to avoid homelessness, I enabled the exact behavior that eventually made me homeless anyway. If I could go back and talk to myself 6 months ago, I'd say, you deserve to feel safe and respected in your own home. You deserve to have your belongings secure and your privacy respected. You deserve roommates who treat you like a human being, not an inconvenience. And if someone is treating you otherwise, you don't have to fix them, understand them, or wait for them to change. You just have to protect yourself. The night Jake locked me out, I thought my life was over. I felt powerless, friendless, and completely at the mercy of someone who enjoyed hurting me. But that experience also showed me that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. When someone tried to break me down systematically, I learned to build myself back up. When someone tried to make me disappear quietly, I learned to fight back loudly. Jake thought he was dealing with an easy target, someone too broken and isolated to cause him any real problems. He was wrong. And if someone in your life is treating you the way Jake treated me, they're wrong about you too. You have rights, you have options, you have more strength than you know. And there are people, lawyers, advocates, friends you haven't met yet, who are ready to help you use that strength to build a better life. Don't let anyone make you feel powerless in your own home. You deserve better. And if you fight for it, you can get it. So tell me in the comments, have you ever dealt with a roommate or housing situation that made you feel powerless? How did you handle it? Or what do you wish you'd done differently? I read every comment, and your stories might help someone else who's going through something similar. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find a place where we belong, and everyone deserves to feel safe at home.